Winter has always seemed momentous, a quiet, frigid pause that signals the end of everything. But that year, when ice crept over the ground and trees stood out against a pale sky, something stirred inside my son Evan and myself, a longing for something we had nearly forgotten. I vividly recall how brilliant his eyes were when he spoke. Mom, he started, his tone hesitant yet optimistic. Do you remember how we would go to the woods every winter? The memory came over me slowly. We'd spent many winters dressed in layers, trudging into the woods with thermoses of hot chocolate and relishing the bitter air. It had been our safe haven, a ritual that linked us together. But when my husband Evan's father died 2 years ago, the prospect of returning to that special place seemed unbearable. Evan's comments jolted me out of my reverie as if they opened a door I hadn't expected. Perhaps we'll return this year. It doesn't have to be the same. He suggested, fading off, concerned that he was asking too much. At 18 years old, I saw something new in his features, calm force and purpose. Okay, I agreed softly. Let's go. The following weekend, we departed early. A little dusting of snow covered the ground, and the air was crisp with the scent of pine. Evan packed a bag full of goodies and a blanket, and I had an old thermos. The woods greeted us like old friends. The familiar crunch of snow underfoot, the quiet gurgling of a distant brook, and the way light penetrated the trees. It was like slipping into a favorite coat. As we walked, Evan spoke about his college plans and future objectives. His calm certainty startled me, generating feelings of pride and regret. My young boy was growing into a man. We picked a spot and spread out the blanket. I poured cocoa into 2 cups, releasing steam into the cold air. Evan leaned against a tree, his expression calm. This is fantastic, he said, his voice filled with delight. For a while, we sat silently listening to the wind whisper through the trees. Evan then gave me a serious look. You know, Dad would have enjoyed it. We're here. My throat tightened and I nodded. He would have, I explained. We shared a warm smile, and for the first time in a long time, my memories of my marriage felt comforting rather than overpowering. A portion of the woodland and the air around us. As the weeks passed, that excursion became the first of many. Each visit to the woods was like peeling away layers of despair to reveal warmth and life underneath. Our conversations became deeper, diving into our aspirations, anxieties, and underlying difficulties. Evan stopped Mom one day as we were heading back to the vehicle. He began carefully, I'm glad we began doing this again. It seems like we are connected again. I hesitated and turned to face him, my chest quivering with emotion. I replied, Evan, I've always been here, and put my hand on his arm. Even when it didn't seem like it, I am very proud of the man you are becoming. He smiled shyly, and for a brief moment he resembled the tiny kid who used to sprint ahead of me along these paths, his laughter echoing through the woods. The woods paths we returned to were softened by fresh snow, and the air was frigid and stinging, exposing each breath. As the holidays approached, I felt the weight of my husband's absence, but Evan seems eager to make the season festive. He pledged definitely that Christmas would be enjoyable this year. I wasn't sure who he was comforting, me or himself. On Christmas morning, I awakened to the aroma of cinnamon and coffee. Evan had taken it upon himself to prepare breakfast, a spread of pancakes, eggs, and toast that would have pleased his father. Standing at the stove, his tall figure somewhat slumped, he flipped a pancake. He said, Merry Christmas, Mom, with a warm and boyish grin. Merry Christmas, Evan. I replied, leaning against the counter, thankful and delighted. This is quite the feast, he shrugged mockingly, only hoping to keep on Santa's good list. After breakfast, we exchanged gifts. My presents to him were modest, a few books and a new scarf, but Evan's surprise astounded me. He was unusually shy as he gave me a nicely wrapped present. Open it, he coaxed, his voice tinged with excitement. Inside there were 2 large plush blankets with a bright green tint reminiscent of pine trees and a nice velvety texture. He nonchalantly recounted our wooded adventures, but his gaze was fixed on my reply. I assumed they'd make it cozier. Running my hands over the material, I was surprised by how sensitive his gesture was. Evan, this is awesome. Thank you, I said, smiling warmly. He smirked, apparently proud of himself. So, if you're going to pull me out into the icy weather, I figured the least I could do is protect us from turning into ice. Drag you, I responded, raising an eyebrow in fake skepticism. I suppose this tradition was originally your idea. He laughed profoundly and joyfully, filling the room. Okay, I'll admit it, I adore it out there. But don't let it go to your head. Blankets quickly became an integral part of our excursions. Draped over our shoulders, we'd sit in our favorite clearing, drinking chocolate and talking about everything. Evan's taunts became more frequent. His carefree comments were always infused with affection, making my heart quiver in the finest way possible. One day as we slept under the covers, he gently nudged me with his elbow. "Mom," he began with a smile, "you've created an outdoor environment that is really rugged and adventurous." I rolled my eyes and chuckled ruggedly. "Is this your way of pushing me to wear more makeup?" "Not at all," he said, his smile becoming malevolent. "I believe you look quite well for someone roughing it in the woods." A blush developed on my cheeks. "That's wonderful, Evan." "It's a compliment," he remarked with a phony, serious tone. "Do not overanalyze it." His compliments grew more common over time, and they were generally laced with malicious humor. He'd comment, "That coat really makes your eyes stand out, or you're looking like a snow queen today." At first I dismissed them as part of his newly found sense of humor, but the sincerity in his words made me wonder whether he viewed me in an unexpected way. It was both moving and startling, and I found myself looking forward to our journey more than ever. When we returned to the vehicle on a particularly cold evening, Evan draped his blanket over my shoulders as well as mine. "You need this more than I do," he casually replied. Though his gesture was filled with worry, I smiled, amazed by his empathy. "How about you? Aren't you cold?" He shrugged lazily. "I will get by. Besides, you are the one I'm worrying about." There it was again. That calm compassion and steady dedication made me feel like the most important person in his life. Even though Christmas had passed, its spirit lingered in the connection we were re-establishing. Our trips into the woods were more than just a ritual. They developed into a safe haven where we could escape the stresses of the outside world and just be ourselves. With each visit, I felt the barriers around my heart crumble. Grief over the past gives way to modest joy in the present. Evan's presence provided the relief I didn't know I needed. He wasn't my only kid, but he was my anchor. In these peaceful moments, I am with my partner who has reminded me that even in the harshest of winters, warmth may be found. As the snow continued to fall, bathing the earth in white, I realized that we were sharing this winter, this life, one moment at a time. Evan unexpectedly said it 2 days before my birthday. I hadn't expecting much. Perhaps a nice supper at home or another leisurely excursion to the woods we liked, but Evan had other plans. "I have a plan," he said, leaning against the kitchen counter with a malicious gleam in his eyes. "I want to take you someplace special for your birthday." Special. "What does this mean?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "It implies," he explained, drawing out the term with a grin. "You simply need to prepare and trust me with the rest." That is all he revealed. His hesitation made me laugh, but it also aroused my attention. Evan got up early on my birthday morning, darting about the house with purpose. When I came downstairs, he was putting a portable BBQ into the vehicle along with a cooler and many food bags. I grinned as I observed him and added, "You are very serious about this." "Of course I am," he said, brushing the snow off his jacket and standing up. "It's your birthday. You deserve the best." I couldn't argue with it. I went upstairs to dress, and when I returned, he gave me a lengthy stare. He just said, "You look perfect," with a gentle, almost bashful smile. The ride to the new woods took about an hour with snow-covered roads that glistened in the gentle winter sunshine. When we arrived, I was astounded by the beauty of our surroundings. It wasn't like our typical woodlands, thicker and calmer with towering evergreens and a little frozen lake in the middle. "Wow," I said as we stepped out of the car. The air was fresh and pure, and the only sound was the rustling of trees in the wind. "I told you it was exceptional," Evan said with a wide smile. He quickly unloaded the vehicle, put up the grill, and placed the food on a picnic table he had cleared of snow. He thought of everything: steak, vegetables, fresh bread, and a little bottle of wine. The location was picturesque, reminiscent of a winter postcard. As the grill started to sizzle, we wrapped ourselves in blankets and watched the sun fall lower in the sky, casting a golden light over the snowy countryside. Evan poured wine into 2 glasses and gave one to me. then raised his own in salute. He addressed you in a kind and honest tone. To the most amazing person I know, I couldn't tell whether it was the wine or his words that made my cheeks flush. You're too kind, Evan. It is true. He kept his demeanor cool and honest. You should feel great every day, but particularly today. We spent the day laughing, joking, and enjoying the meal he prepared. It was one of the best birthdays I'd ever had. Not because of the food or the surroundings, but because of Evan's consideration and care. Throughout the day, I felt very appreciated. As twilight came, the woods transformed into something even more breathtaking. The sky deepened into vibrant blues and purples, and the air turned colder. We unwillingly started packing, knowing it was time to go. But when Evan turned the key in the ignition, the car didn't start. He mumbled, "No, no, no," and tried again. The engine sputtered before becoming silent. "What's wrong?" I inquired, however. I'd already predicted the answer. "I suppose the battery has died," he replied regretfully. "Of course there's no signal out here." We exchanged looks as we realized the enormity of the situation. It was much too cold to walk back, and with no way to call for help, we realized we'd have to stay the night here. "Well," I replied, striving to smile. "At least we're prepared." Evan laughed softly, but his rigid shoulders indicated his concern. I guess my amazing notion was not quite flawless. "It's okay," I reassured him. "We'll make it work. Frankly, there are worse locations to be trapped." We gathered our supplies from the vehicle, including blankets, leftover food, and wine, and set up camp beside the still warm grill. The woods was ominously quiet, with just Evan's little fire providing light. As we huddled together beneath the covers, the issue became less urgent and more personal. The cold drew us closer together. Evan's arm wrapped snug around my shoulders. "This isn't the birthday I had planned for you," he said gently after a while. "It's perfect." I stated it truthfully, and it was. I had an unexpected sense of calm in the light of the fire under a starry sky aided by Evan's continual warmth. "You're terrific," he said unexpectedly, his tone serious. I gazed at him, shocked. "What you are," he said, capturing my attention. "Despite several hurdles, you stay yourself, strong and lovely." I swallowed hard, his words settling deep into my chest. "Thank you, Evan," I responded softly. His hand found mine under the blankets, and his touch was calming and gentle. "I mean it," he said. "You're wonderful, and I hope you recognize it." We sat in quiet for a long time, hearing only the crackling of the fire. The air between us seemed warmer and heavier, as if something unsaid remained there. And in that seclusion in the chilly woods, I saw something that both pleased and troubled me. Evan was no longer just my son. He was my company, my anchor, and the one who made me feel really alive. As the fire burned down, we leaned into one another, letting the warmth of the moment carry us into the cold night. It wasn't the birthday I expected, but it was one I'd never forget. The warmth of the sheets and the fading embers of the fire lulled me into a sound slumber. The woods remained still all night, save for the occasional rustling of branches and the faint hoot of an owl. I didn't realize how exhausted I was until sleep dragged me down. Between dreaming and waking, I felt a warm, brief touch on my cheek, followed by Evan's hushed voice. "Wake up, Mom," he murmured softly. His tone was soft, even inviting. It was dawn, and I awakened gingerly, not wanting to disrupt the cozy cocoon of warmth I had created. However, his perseverance paid off. His fingertips barely touched my shoulder as he said, "Come on, sleepyhead. It's time to get up." When I opened my eyes, the early light filtered through the trees, casting a gorgeous glow on Evan's face. He knelt beside me, his expression calm and empathetic. I could still feel his presence on my face where his lips had formerly been. "You could have let me sleep longer," I said. "My voice is still thick from sleep," I taunted. "My voice is still thick from sleep." "Do you miss the view?" he answered by nodding at the frost-covered trees that surrounding us. Not a chance. As predicted, Evan had already taken leadership of the situation. He had reignited the fire and was slowly brewing coffee over the flames, the rich, inviting aroma floating through the crisp morning air. He answered by giving me a steaming cup. "Drink this to keep warm. I'm going to go to the road and see if I can flag down someone to assist with the car." "Evan, you don't have to." I started, but he cut me off with a raised hand and a harsh expression. "You're staying here by the fire where it's warm. I'll be back before you know it." His speech was calm and confident, reminding me of how far he had come. He wasn't the young boy who needed me to watch after him anymore. He was a guy of constancy and reliability, someone I could rely on. Be cautious, I said softly as I watched him fasten his coat and grab a torch. He gave me a soothing smile. Racing always. The minutes went slowly as I sat near the fire, its heat burning at my hands and feet while I drank the coffee he'd poured. Without Evan, the silence of the woods was heavier, but I trusted him. I knew he wouldn't stop until we were safe. He kept his word and returned less than an hour later. His cheeks reddened from the cold, yet his countenance was joyous. He said with his breath visible in the chilly air that he had found someone to help him. A guy with a truck is on the way. We'll be out here in no time. Evan instantly started packing our items. The truck arrived soon thereafter, and with some effort they were able to restart our vehicle. Thank you, I told the driver, my gratitude overflowing out. Anytime. He waved and drove away, leaving Evan and me to follow in our now operational car. The ride home was uneventful, with the sun rising higher as we returned to familiar pathways. Evan flashed intermittent looks at me, his expression solemn. You okay? He inquired after a time. I'm all right, I assured him, despite the fact that I felt great. I felt safe, cared for, and strangely entire. When we finally arrived home, the warmth of the house enveloped us like a loving hug. I collapsed into the sofa, tired from the journey. Stay there, Evan, ordered, his tone calm but firm. I'll unload the vehicle. I didn't argue, allowing my eyes to shut as the events of the past 24 hours enveloped me like a comforting blanket. By the time Evan returned, I was almost sleeping. I felt him place another blanket over me, pausing momentarily. His acts were caring and spoke more than words could. You are pretty great, I heard him say, almost as if speaking to himself before going on to handle the others. I went deeply asleep, my heart satisfied and my mind at ease. Whatever challenges we encountered, I was convinced we'd overcome them together. Evan has frequently proved to me that he could not only take for himself, but also care about me. And at that moment, I realized something I had never dared to admit before our bond blossomed. It was no longer just a mother-son relationship, but something deeper and more profound. It was built on trust, respect, and a love that transcended conventional roles. As I slept, I had another dream about the forest. The flickering firelight against the trees, the warmth of his arm around me, and his voice informing me that I was safe. The memories blended seamlessly with the present, creating a sensation I couldn't quite define, but knew I'd have with me forever.